So we're doing strength, we're doing a bit of cardio exercise. The government recommendation is 150 minutes a week. So you can break that down. That's, sort of 20 minutes a day or so. And then the other thing would be some mobility and flexibility.
Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. Welcome to episode 98 of the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen. I really know that there are countless other things that you could be doing, so I don't at all take for granted the time that you give listening to this podcast. Now, I must admit, I am getting just a little bit excited about reaching my 100th episode. It's not that common for a podcast to last for this length of time. I actually did a little bit of research and I've discovered that 44% of podcasts actually have less than 3 episodes and only 11% make it to 50 episodes. I couldn't find any stats on how many shows make it past 100, but it's safe to say that the percentage would be pretty low. And I know why. Each and every episode costs money and it takes many hours to create and produce. And as I said last week, to help me celebrate, I just really would love for you to take a moment of time just to rate and review this podcast on Apple and or Spotify. Just by doing that small, simple task, you help this podcast to reach more midlife women like yourself. And it really would mean the world to me and would be the best gift that I could receive to mark my 100th episode. Now, today we're talking about a topic that many women have a love-hate relationship with, and that's exercise. I had such an interesting conversation with Anja Lineen, who is a dedicated personal trainer and health and menopause coach. Anja has an extensive knowledge and experience in both fields and combines her expertise as a personal trainer with specialised knowledge in health coaching and menopause education. And she helps women navigate the unique challenges of menopause. She believes in the transformative power of education and empowerment, and her clients appreciate her ability to provide evidence-based information while offering compassionate support throughout their midlife transformation years. Anja is committed to working alongside women, helping them embrace their bodies, unleash their potential, and live their best lives during and beyond menopause. Sounds like a great outcome for any woman. So without further ado, let's welcome Anja to the show. A very big welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast, Anja. It is so lovely to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jo. It's lovely to be with you. I love any opportunity to talk midlife.
So do I. So we're going to be talking everyone's ear off today by the sounds of it. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, Anja, you're a health and menopause coach, and that's definitely something that we'll talk about more as a conversation progresses. But first of all, I'd like you to tell us just a little bit more about yourself and how your past has led to your present. So you're based in Sydney, but as we can hear, you have a South African accent. So did you grow up in South Africa, and then what brought you to Australia?
Yes, I have a very varied background. I grew up in South Africa to German parents, hence the name. So, yeah, all my schooling in South Africa, learned English when I went to school, so I spoke German first. But yeah, sort of grew up as a South African. Then I went and lived in England for about 6 years. I had a year in France and ended up here in Australia with my Irish husband. And we now have 3 Australian children. So There's a real mixed bag there. But I was transferred out here with work. We'd always talked about coming to Australia. And when the opportunity presented itself all of 24 years ago, we sort of said, sometimes you just have to take a chance. And if it doesn't work out, you can go back. But to me, it would have been far worse at some point in the future to go, remember when we had that chance? So that's how we ended up in Australia and been in Sydney the whole time.
It is a very multicultural background that you come from, the experiences that you've had. So for you, has it been a good decision? Are you happy that you made that
The
move
best.
then?
The best. It's very similar to South Africa, very outdoor, community-minded lifestyle. And I just think I look at parts of Europe, my family's in Europe, my in-laws are in Ireland, and it's beautiful. But I just think the kids have a great lifestyle here. They've got a really good childhood. So I'm grateful to have been given to give them that, even though we are very far away from everything else.
Yeah. And that would make it hard for your extended family. They'd be wanting to see you and the children more and more, I'd imagine.
Yeah,
So
it
how old
does
are
make
they?
it tricky, but it's such a great place to live. As I said, 24 years we've been here.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a long time now when you think about it, 24 years. No, or you're almost up to your quarter of a century.
Yes, nearly.
Yep. And so how old are your children, Anja?
15, 17, and 19.
Okay. And are they wanting to travel the world like
Well,
you
the
did?
oldest one has already. She's already done a gap year. She was in England last year, working at a school. And what did she say? She did 19 countries for her 19 years of age. So she had a
Fantastic.
great time. She's back here now at uni. The middle one's about to write his HSC this year. So that's the Sydney equivalent of the final schooling exams. He'll probably take a gap year. I took a gap year. My mum took a gap year. So it's something we've always talked about. And I really encourage for the children because I just think, life gets serious so quickly. And it's a great time just to have some time out, have some fun, still working but learning so much about life. So I think that's really important.
That's another part of a great education, isn't it, to have that life
I
experience?
think so, yeah. Just
Yeah.
seeing that people do things differently and that's okay.
Yes.
I think,
Yes.
you find that when you travel to different countries or even around Australia or meet different people and it's like, oh, wow, it's just, there are different ways of doing things and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
okay.
That's so true. That's so true. Anja, what career path did you have? So at what age did you have a clear direction on where you wanted to go? And is it the same or?
I always had a head in marketing. So that's what I did for the first years of my career in London. And that's how I ended up in Australia. I used to work in direct marketing for a conference company. Came out to Australia with them and then got a bit bored of myself talking about personal training and just went and did the course just so that I could stop saying, I really should do this. So then I went into personal training. I was pregnant with my middle one, who's, as I said, 17.
Yep.
So 17, 18 years I've been doing the personal training. And just with, sort of having a third child and no family support here, it suited itself to our lifestyle and having the children. And it's grown as the kids have got older. And then the menopause hit. And then I decided I needed to know a bit more about that. So that's our sort of, and it's not a complete change. It's a bit of a sideways step. I think they really complement each other. I honestly thought the personal training would be, tick, interest factor, won't be in the industry for long. But I've found that as I've got older, my clients have got older, and they don't want some 20-year-old training them who's got no idea about hot flushes or pelvic floor issues or any of those extra demands on time that just come with life. So I'm loving it, actually. It's good to have that combination of things.
Oh, that's so lovely to hear. And I can imagine too, because for myself, I couldn't think of anything worse than having a life young 20-something telling me what to do and have no idea of what my body's capabilities are right at this point in time, because they have changed. Your body definitely changes.
Yeah.
And I think you have to, like with most things, experience it before you get that full understanding of what it's like. So obviously you've always been interested in exercise and movement.
Yeah.
Is that what you said you were thinking about doing some study in personal training. Is that what really got you into it?
Yeah, I started going to the gym when I was in my teens. Mm-hmm. I was never big on the team sports. Like at school, I played hockey and, sort of swam and things like that, but not the best sports person as such. And I think that's part of it, though, that you don't have to be some excellent runner or netballer or hockey player, tennis player. It's just about taking part. And that's actually the bulk of the population. that elite level is actually quite small. So I just think we all need to move every day. We tend to have more and more sedentary lifestyles. I know when I got my last car, they sort of, wanted to upgrade me to the wave your foot under the boot and it'll open up, and push a button and it'll close. And I was like, no, I had my little rebellion. I still pull my boot down because I just think everything gets, I say more convenient, but I actually think it doesn't help us because we use our muscles less and less. So that was,
and that's obvious, isn't it, when you compare the blue zone countries and what sorts of incidental exercise that they do throughout their day and have done from a very young age, and we don't. We do tend to become more sedentary as we get older.
Yeah, it's just part of their lives, isn't it?
Yes.
Walking places. And I find in Australia as well, we drive a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We were in Europe last year and everyone's out walking and on public transport, and it's just the way different cities are built. But yeah, we are quite reliant on our cars here.
We definitely are. So we know that exercise and regular movement is one of the key pillars for good health now and for aging well into the future then. And you have mentioned that you work with women in the middle of life. Now, we all know that can also be a very tricky and problematic crowd of women. So you've got a mixed bags of clients, I'd imagine, that you deal with. So in this stage of life, many of us women have had decades of experience with exercise, whether it be positive or negative or anything in between. There's also long-held beliefs that people might have about exercise, and then just not to mention time restraints that many women find themselves. So some women get to the point where they suddenly realise they may not have exercised for years. So if that might be you, if I'm speaking to somebody who, pretend I'm one of your clients, I haven't exercised for years, I may not be all that, a sporty spice. So what do you suggest that I do? How do we get going? And how do you, as a personal trainer, really, get people fired up to see that it's important?
Yeah, I love that, because I do think that that is actually the bulk of the population. And I think that's what keeps a lot of people away from exercise, because they're like, oh, I haven't done it for so long and I can't do this, and I've banned the word can't in my class.
Good on you.
Nobody's allowed to say the C word. I'm very much about come and do something, do a little bit. And for most of the exercises that I'll give, I'm going to take a star jump, for example. A lot of women do not want to do star jumps. There's pelvic floor issues, there's all sorts of, joint issues potentially coming into play. And I'm like, right, tap it out. Arms up to the sides, or if the shoulders aren't great, do some bicep curls. Just do something. Do whatever you can do, because it's always going to be better than sitting and doing nothing. So I hate it when people sort of go, oh, my elbow's sore, so I can't come to class. That's just a random example. But I was like, well, what about the rest of your body? Your legs still work, your glutes still work, your tummy still works. Come and do what you can. And that's very much with starting to move as well. If you really don't do any exercise, maybe start with marching on the spot a little bit, or try and do 10 squats while the kettle's boiling, or do some push-ups against the wall. Whatever it is, just start small, because if we go out gung-ho, invariably we're going to get tired, we're going to get some muscle ache, and it's just going to become arduous. It's going to become a chore for most people. Whereas if we start slowly, little changes made consistently and regularly are going to add up to so much more. I had a great example from a client the other day. We were doing push-ups in class, and she was like, oh, I really need to go back to doing 10 push-ups a day. She used to do that, got out of the habit, and sort of thought to herself, can't make that much of a difference. But she's like, it really does make a difference. So, just little bits every day. Start small and start to build up on it. Find something you like. Mm-hmm. Find something you enjoy doing with someone else, going for a walk with a friend. All of those little bits just to start getting a little bit more active. And then once you start to feel the benefits, because I can pretty much guarantee you're going to feel better for it.
Yes.
I've got one client who goes swimming every day. Even now in the middle of winter, she goes swimming. She goes, you know what? I never regret it. I might not feel like it, but I know I never regret going for that swim. And I love that.
Yeah, I love it too. It's sometimes those, and you've got to listen to those voices that are in your head trying to talk you out of something, because they are so powerful, aren't they?
Very, very.
Yeah, and as you found, like that client of yours has just found with the swimming, it would be very easy for her to say, particularly in the middle of winter, if she's hearing those voices in her head, I really don't want to do it today, just to say, okay, well, I'll make an excuse for myself and maybe I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then the same voice happens tomorrow, and that's how it can progress.
She's a fabulous one, actually. She started swimming around her 50s, midlife. I think she had some back issues and started swimming regularly and has just kept going 5 days a week. She now comes to 2 of my classes at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I saw her coming out of the pool. So she does both. She's 77.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Look at, she's up, she's mobile, she stands upright. It's just true sort of success story in that sense of just persistence, consistency.
Yeah, well, she's your poster girl then, isn't she, for something like that? And the starting small and doing it often and having accountability of some form, those components are really key too, isn't it?
Yeah. The accountability is good. And
well, that's what I find too. With the ladies who are in my Better Than Before membership, we're working on micro challenges every month now, and just micro habits.
Yep.
And they're tiny little things that you can embed. When you do that, it's completely up to you, but just have that accountability and self-accountability as well.
Yeah. And I think sort of tracking as well, paying attention to how you feel and noticing the changes in either your mobility, your flexibility, your energy levels, how you're sleeping. I mean, exercise brings all of those things. I think a lot of us grew up with associating exercise with weight management, and had a great chat with a group the other day. I was working with 70 to 80-year-olds, and I was talking about switching on your glutes. So your bottom muscles, nice big muscles, they powerhouse, we should really use them more. And one of the ladies wasn't quite sure how to do that. So sort of said, right, let's do a couple of things here. And I said, these are the muscles you want to use. We really actually want to have quite defined glutes. And all the ladies were like, oh, we've always tried to have flat bottoms because I don't know, I grew up in that era of being really skinny, and I was like, no, we need those muscles.
Yeah.
And I do think the young girls I see in the gym these days are embracing that. They're doing a lot more strength work, which is just amazing, because I know growing up in South Africa, it was all about being thin as.
Oh, sure. Same here. In my generation, you didn't want to have a big backside. That was, inverted commas, that was a sin almost to have a big backside. Whereas now the women do work on having nice rounded rear ends.
Yeah.
But that again, that's a fashion thing as well. We need to change our idea of looking good to fit into clothes, really to think about how we feel in ourselves. As you were mentioning, more energy, and I think mood comes into it as well. Do you find the women who then begin?
Oh, it's my tagline is you're one workout away from a good mood.
Yeah.
It's, like this other lady said, you never regret exercising. We exercise outdoors in the park, so you get the benefit of green space, fresh air. We're a group together, so you get that community element. It's not about weight management at all. It does increase your muscle mass, which helps with your metabolism. But I generally think we can't out-exercise what we eat. I mean, if you come to an hour's exercise class, you've still got the rest of the day to eat badly if that's your choice. So it's an element of weight management, but I think we really need to break away from that association of exercise and weight management, rather to go exercise and good mood. And as I said, stress management. Stress is such an issue, and it really changes us on a cellular level. So being able to manage our stress is key. It's really important.
Yes. And as we get older too, a lot of the things, like if you had a perfect menu that you could put together for a woman, what sort of components, because it's going to look different to when a woman was younger. So what would you suggest are really important components to add for anyone who's wanting to start to establish some sort of exercise menu that they can call on?
Yeah. Well, I think the key really is finding something that you enjoy. And I probably should preface this, I'm going to say, assuming you don't have any major injuries or anything, trying to do a couple of strength sessions a week. So that's resistance training. And, doing push-ups is resistance training because you're pushing up your body weight. So starting with body weight exercises like push-ups, squats, lunges, anything that you have to push or pull to activate those muscles so that they pull on the bones and help with your bone density and your muscle mass, because those are two huge factors as we age. And I think I'll just jump a little bit sideways here. We tend to sort of think about menopause and go, okay, I've reached menopause, but we forget that there's probably another 25, 30 years of life potentially, depending what ages we're going through this. And what we do now really impacts that future. So by doing the strength work now and building our muscle mass and building our bone density is helping future you in 5, 10, 15 years' time. So the strength exercise is super, super important. Then a bit of cardio, a bit of that huff and puff, get out of breath work, and that can be sport, that can be dancing. I've recently discovered pickleball and I'm loving it. That gets your heart rate going a bit. You're running around the court. It's great fun. So again, whatever you enjoy, swimming, anything that gets you out of breath a little bit is good for the heart, because again, incidence of heart disease skyrockets post-menopause, because pre-menopause, we have all those hormones that are protecting our hearts. But once we hit menopause, our risk of heart disease equals that of men. And it's one of the biggest killers of women. So we really need to look after our hearts as well. So we're doing strength, we're doing a bit of cardio exercise. The government recommendation is 150 minutes a week. So you can break that down. That's, sort of 20 minutes a day or so. And then the other thing would be some mobility and flexibility. So that's flexibility, I guess, is about, we typically think about being able to reach down to our toes, but mobility as well is the range of motion. So being able to move a joint in its full extent. So, how many times do you speak to someone who's hurt their back and you go, oh, what did you do? And they go, I was just reaching for something. And it's that stiffness that comes from being in one position for most of the day. The minute you move, something goes, and you're like, oh, that wasn't so good. So working on mobility and, that's swinging the arms around, swimming, awesome, get that full range of the shoulder going around. So we're throwing in a bit of that. And then a lot of those exercises could be like a Tai Chi or a yoga, which then brings the mindfulness side into it as well.
Yeah.
So if we can mix and match and draw on all of those elements, then we're going to get a well-rounded routine. We're not going to get bored with doing the same thing every day. If you can find, a group of people to do it with that you enjoy, if you can do it outside, even better, because you're going to get that benefit of the green space and fresh air, as I said, and,
Professor Belinda Beck was on an episode last year, and she was a world-leading professor in the area of osteoporosis and, looking at bone disease in women and the sorts of things, exercise that you can do. Also thinking about, when I was listening to you speak, there's such key things that a lot of us don't put into their exercise menu. Another one that I was thinking of, just balance. And when you're talking about Tai Chi, you're talking about yoga, they're also focusing on some of the balance as well, which is, again, important because, for people who are beyond a certain age, if you've got frailty and bones that are weak and you fall, you are, you're opening up to fractures.
Oh, the mortality risk is huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
Hip fractures. I remember when I was studying many years ago, and they said two of the things that keep the elderly at home is fear of incontinence, so the embarrassment that comes with that, and fear of falling. So that balance element is so important. And only about 3% of the population works on their balance. And again, it's something relatively easy that we can do, standing on one leg while you're brushing your teeth, or, trying to link it with something that you do already to remind you to do it. But just starting to lift one foot, try and hold for 30 seconds, do the other side, and then you can slowly build on that. Yeah, really important. Another one that's quite an interesting longevity factor is grip strength.
Yes, tell us more about that. I've read information about that. So okay. You explain how you find out what to do and what you can do to increase it.
So I teach Pilates, and I find a lot of women, when we're doing a plank or push-ups or anything, they're like, oh, my wrists hurt. And I used to get that, and I've obviously built up the strength over time. And the other thing that we now do is I teach bar classes as well, and we use a ballet bar, which is really secure and solid on the wall. And at the end of every class, I get them to sit on the floor underneath the bar, arms up, and pull up. So you have your feet out in front of you, you lift your hips, and you're pulling yourself up. Great for the shoulders, but those hands get a really good workout. If you think, you're opening a jar to eat, or carrying your groceries, any of those things, we need grip strength. And if you stumble and you have to hold on to something, again, you want to have that grip strength. So, yeah.
Yep.
One we wouldn't necessarily think about, I don't think, but is really important.
That's very true too. Yeah, we don't think about that. And grips, like you see all sorts of aids for women, not for women, just for older people on how to open up jars and those sort of things. So you want to be able to open a jar without all of those aids for as long as you possibly can. They're the minor nuisances that will add up.
This is it. Yeah, so true. And, again, there, if you don't want to go out and do exercise, even if you're doing some hand strengthening, you get a squishy ball and squeeze that ball and really, get those hands moving. Little things like that really do add up.
Now, you gave us some great ideas on what we can do to begin, Anja, and that, keep it small, keep it simple, don't try to overdo it. So let's say we're all fired up, and then a couple of weeks into it and you start to lose that momentum. What sort of things can you suggest for somebody who's all fired up and then is just finding that momentum slowly disappearing?
Yeah. Look, I think one of the key things I always try and ask my clients is, what do you want to be doing in the next 10 years, for example? Have that really clear image of, let's call it retirement. What are you going to be doing? And I talk to people who are going out bushwalking and they're playing sports or things like that. I'm like, do you want to continue with that? And they're like, yeah. So if that's what you want to be able to continue doing, or if you'd like to be able to travel, and that involves carrying a bag, putting it in the overhead locker, picking it up, putting it over, all those things, having that really clear image of how you'd like your future life to be. What is future you want to be doing? You might want to be able to pick up a grandchild out of a cot. You need hand strength. You need to be able to bend up. You need a strong back and core. Think about those things. And then every time you're trying to decide whether to exercise or not, those little voices are in your head, go, don't go. You can go, well, if I don't go, it's going to take me away from that future image. And if I do go, it's going to take me a step towards that future me that I'd like to live. So each individual choice, whether that's movement, what we're eating and drinking, how we're sleeping and managing our stress, each choice is something that we have a fair bit of control over in most cases, and that can take us towards or away from that image, that vision of that future life that we want to be living.
Yeah.
It's like when you're saving for a holiday and you're putting the money aside and you see a beautiful pair of shoes. I have a little bit of a weakness for shoes. Beautiful pair of shoes, and they'd make you really happy. You'd be very happy together. But that $150 goes a long way towards the holiday budget as well. So it's, do we go towards the holiday or away from the holiday? Each choice sort of takes us in two directions.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's a good mind shift to make to decide whether or not it's going to get you closer or further away.
Yeah.
So great advice.
Because life does happen, and we do revert to old ways when a stress comes in. Like I always say to someone, if you're trying to lose weight or start an exercise routine, you need to have a fairly clear plate. So I wouldn't be starting a new job and trying to change some habits, because there's just going to be too much going on. So you want to be in a fairly stable place as much as you can be, because life will then happen again. Stuff happens. It's just the way life is. So if you can then have that routine established and recognize it, then if you can stop and take a moment and go, well, hang on a second, I'm slipping back, and then stop and reset, and don't write off the whole week and just sort of, I'll start on Monday. I'll start again now. Just get back on track, and remember how good you feel when you do move.
Yes. It's deciding in advance too. That's another key concept that I usually talk about when I'm working with clients as well, is deciding in advance what you're going to do if something's going to interrupt your normal routine.
Yep.
And then also that concept, and I've spoken about this on the podcast previously, and again, working with people, it's the concept of a minimum and a maximum. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So, on those days where you can't, you're not going to be able to give your half an hour or an hour, whatever time you devoted, what can you do in a 5-minute snack? What's something that as a minimum that you can do? So you're still taking not the normal size step towards your goal, but maybe just a little baby step towards it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. And I do the same when I'm coaching people. Sort of, what are you going to do if it rains? You're going to get up in the morning and go running? What happens if it's raining? What happens if? What happens if? And they get a bit frustrated because they're like, got to come up with solutions. But yeah.
That's right. And it's getting rid of those voices, those excuses then, isn't it?
People go and walk around shopping centres to get their steps up. Great, go and do it. Whatever it is. But it's having that ready list of other things to do.
For sure. Yeah. Just out of interest, do you have a favourite form of exercise?
I've been a runner for a long time now. Well, run's generous. I'm really slow these days. I put one foot in front of the other faster than when I'm walking. I do enjoy that because you can do it anywhere, anytime. You just need a good pair of shoes. Well, I'm not a barefoot runner, and it's pretty quick and easy to do. I've really picked up my weight training because I've got osteopenia, which I discovered last year, and I was a little bit put out. I've always talked about osteoporosis because I knew my grandmother had it, and I'm built like her, and I've got a fairly small bone structure. And I went and had a bone density test last year because I was like, I tell all my clients to go and do this, so I've got to go and do it as well. And then they came back and said, you've got osteopenia in your spine. I was like, what? Wasn't too happy about that one. So I went and sought out an exercise program specifically for bone density. And I'm loving that, actually. It's great to feel strong. I'm lifting much heavier weights than I would have before because I'm the same as anyone else. We sort of do what we like and what works. Yes. And so I'm really enjoying the weightlifting. And then, like I said, I've started playing pickleball as well, which I'm still very much a beginner at, but it's fun.
Oh, that's great. So you've really got all those, the components that you've talked about, make it fun, what you enjoy, starting small, and just adding those different elements of it as well. Yeah. Some by yourself, some with a group. And that whole osteopenia thing, I talked about Professor Beck earlier with you. That is one of the things that I also had is osteopenia. And with strength training, I've been able to reverse it. So fingers crossed in your it is. In your next DEXA scan, you are going to be able to see that you've got a clear bill or at least an improvement, because
I have started HRT since then, which will help as well.
It will, yes.
But it's so important. Again, it's something that we can do something towards, even if you're not going to fix it completely. There's definitely steps that we can take. And I'm a great believer in doing what we can.
Yep.
Rather than resorting to medicine straight away. Do what you can, take matters into your own hands, have some control and some say over your health and your well-being.
Yeah. No, that's really important. Nat, we will talk about the next part of what you're doing now with your work. You mentioned that you're a menopause coach. Now, I can imagine there's going to be lots of women who have never heard of this specific type of coaching before. So could you just explain to us what a menopause coach is and then how you personally help women who are going through the menopause transition?
Sure. It links quite closely into the health and well-being coaching as well, because, again, it's very much about educating women on menopause, because I think the conversation around that has grown dramatically in the last 4 or 5 years, since I've sort of started paying attention to the area. We're generally a lot more open about our discussions and there's a lot more information out there, but there's still a lot of misconceptions. So there's a lot of education involved in what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And again, we quite often look back and go, is that what was going on? So a lot of education, and then again, working with women on what is it you want your future to look like? Where do you want to be going? And I had a great conversation with my physio this morning about that whole being healthy in yourself so that you can do your job really well and you can show up for everything else really well. That general health and well-being, be that physical health, mental health, spiritual health, they're all really, really important in determining how we show up for ourselves and for everyone else. So again, it's having that future vision. And what can you do now? What can you do? What are the symptoms that are bothering you the most? Which ones do you want to try and manage first? Recognizing which symptoms you have. We put down so much of what goes on to midlife. We're feeling more anxious, well, because, we're busy and we've got this going on and that, teenagers, which are, stressful at times. And I'm trying to be very...
Yes, I could see you were looking
challenging. Yeah. And then, we're trying to hold on jobs and relationships and still see our friends and. So we sort of go, oh, yeah, it's no wonder that I'm stressed and a little bit anxious and not sleeping well. But it could actually be a menopause symptom and something that you can do about. And just when we know better, we can choose better, I think. It's, if you know, okay, that could be a menopause symptom, what are my options? I can exercise more. I can change the way I eat. I can go and get a prescription for HRT or MHT, as it's called now. I can ask for help. Once you know what's going on, then you can choose a better pathway for yourself and whatever works for you. Everyone has their own experience of menopause. Whilst we'll all go through it as women at varying stages, it's going to be influenced by our genetics, by our medical history, by what we expect. That's a huge part of it. If you go into menopause going, oh, here's another thing and it's going to be awful and, just something else that I've got to suffer through. And then the minute you get a symptom, it justifies all that fear and frustration that you're feeling. Whereas if we can go into menopause going, okay, this is going to happen. I remember when I got my first hot flush, I was at an exercise class and I'm used to getting hot and sweaty, but it was my back that was getting really hot, which was really odd. And then I went, it's like this light bulb went. I literally saw the light bulb and I went, oh, I think that's a hot flush. I'm like, oh my goodness, okay, here we are. Was not expecting this. That I was in my mid-40s. I was like, oh, right.
Yeah. And it is, like you mentioned, it's such an individual experience to go through. It's something that every woman will go through. It's a natural phase of our life, but it's such an individual experience. And so what you're doing is just helping women to recognize that it is. And it's not a one size fits all for people either. It's to find out everyone's presenting differently. And some will say, as we know, and have spoken about many times on the podcast, some women will sail through. That's great, but that's not every woman's experience. That's that's a small percentage.
They reckon 1 in 4 women will go through with minimal symptoms, but 1 in 4 will suffer majorly. And then you've got the women who have medically induced menopause, so having a hysterectomy, or often with cancer treatments, a lot of women are thrown into it, and it's like flicking a switch. It's one day to the next, and it can be really dramatic and quite isolating and frightening. And people sort of, if it is an illness related one, people will ask about the illness and show concern about that, and then once hopefully you've recovered from that, oh, okay, great, you've recovered, and don't realize that there's the whole menopause side then as well that's affecting them, and that needs to be managed and considered. So it's again, and that's where I think that menopause conversation needs to be for everybody, because it might be a colleague at work, it might be a relative, it might be a friend, and if you've got that understanding that they've had a hysterectomy, for example, oh, okay, so you've recovered from surgery, but what else is going on for you now? And where else do you need that support? So I just think it's a conversation for everybody.
Yes. And you're postmenopausal now. So was it something that you went through that triggered this, I need to help other women? If I'm going through it and I experienced, whatever, is that how you came upon this area of what you're doing?
So as I said, I had the hot flushes, and I went to friend of mine who's a yoga teacher and exercise physiologist, ran a hormones workshop, and she sort of talked about a couple of things, and I picked up some tips there that sort of seemed to affect my hot flushes and sort of improve them a bit, which then led me down this course of study. I'm a bit of a learner. I love studying. I love education, and I did a UK-based course. And interesting, actually, it's called Third Age Women's Wellness. And that third age phrase is quite well known in Europe, and it's not so much here. They've got University of the Third Age. So really recognizing that there is that whole next phase of life, which is there. So did the program, started talking to friends who sort of a few years ago were like, oh, menopause. That's interesting. You could sort of see people backing away cautiously. But I just kept talking about it because that's what I do. And then just, as people started to have those realizations, and I realized that what I was sharing, people really didn't know about. And it's so wonderful when somebody comes and goes, that really helped me. If they learn something from you, even if it's one little bit where they can change how they're exercising, how they're sleeping, whatever it is, that they have that empowerment to take control of their health in the future. They feel so much better in themselves, and being able to share that knowledge and help women help themselves is really lovely.
It is. Yeah.
It's nice.
So how many years have you been working in this space now, in the adding that menopause arm to
the menopause, it was 2019.
Okay.
Because I remember it was during COVID that I finished my studies. I was like, I've got all this time, I have to finish my course.
Yes. That was transitional for so many people, that COVID. So it was a blessing and in disguise for many people, curse and a blessing. But it got people fired up and able to do the sorts of things that you were doing now.
So, and since then, the conversation has just escalated dramatically. I mean, we've got a menopause inquiry going on at the moment, Senate inquiry, which is fabulous that it's the government sitting up and taking notice. And hopefully we'll see some great changes from educating GPs so that they can help women through to, sort of workplaces recognizing that women can do with some support, because it's transitional. It's, it's a phase of a woman's life. And so many women will leave work at this age because they're feeling overwhelmed. If they're not sleeping well, then they get a bit anxious, and then they lose their confidence, and then they're not sleeping well, and it becomes a vicious cycle. So if we can support women and help them stay at work, it works into the gender pay gap. The longer women stay at work, the more superannuation they're going to earn, the better off they're going to be as they get older. So it just has a knock-on effect in so many different areas.
It certainly does. And it's great now that it's being spoken in the highest levels of government, and it's something that the genie is out of the bottle, and women are expecting more. And because of that, the groundswell of people expecting more, women expecting more, change is going to come. May not be as fast as all of us want at certain times, but at least it is happening now.
It's happening. And I think the future generations that sort of coming up behind us will really benefit from this. It's life-changing stuff, I think. It really is. It's important to talk about. Yeah.
It is. So I've got some quick fire questions for you now as we wrap up our conversation. Can you share with us, what are your 3 top daily wellness habits that are non-negotiable for you?
Well, definitely exercise has to be in there.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned that. I would have been very disappointed if it didn't appear somewhere.
I'm trying to do a bit more breathing and meditation and sort of incorporating that into my day, even if I don't sit and meditate per se, just to stop and take some deep breaths, just to have that quietening, stress management, sort of coming back into a rational brain, because it's really powerful. So trying to incorporate that into my everyday, and then just good nutrition, eating as much as I can, eating whole foods that look like they did when they were harvested. What's that great saying? Eat food, not too much, mostly plants.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah,
well,
that's great.
Trying to do that. I do still eat chocolate.
Well, and dark chocolate. If you have dark chocolate, it's good for your health. Yes, in moderation, of course.
Yeah.
Anja, what are you most looking forward to in the future?
I'm excited seeing my children grow up. It's really interesting to watch what people they become. I've got some, great relationship with my daughter who's turning 20 this year, and it's just fun seeing what they're doing. It can be a bit scary at times, but it's it's good. And that next phase of life and seeing what it brings. I've got friends talking about retirement. I'm like, oh, I'm not ready for that. I'm loving what I'm doing. I really am. And just to keep helping women and seeing where this takes us it's exciting.
No, it is exciting. It's great to hear that you're feeling that way as well.
Yeah.
And what are you most enjoying about this stage of life that you're in now?
I don't care about what people think about me anymore. There is really that sense of freedom and confidence that I think people were never really looking, but you realize that once you get older that, they don't care. My children sort of say, oh, that's so embarrassing. I'm like, nobody's watching. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That I've really got a newfound sense of confidence. I think it's just, it is really good.
It is. It's liberating.
Yeah, it is. It's good.
And finally, what do you hope 80-year-old Anja is going to say about current day Anja?
I think I'd be proud of myself for helping women. My father was a jeweler, so he made beautiful jewelry, and he said his day-to-day life was pretty happy because people generally buy jewelry as a celebration. It's a happy reason to go and see him. And that's really resonated with me and stayed with me. And I think the work that I do, people generally enjoy coming to class, it's, or working on their health coaching, and they're generally walking away feeling better, feeling empowered, doing something for themselves. And that it's really resonated with me that my work is so positive. It's
Oh, that's great.
Hopefully I'll be proud of myself.
I'm sure you will be. I'm sure 80-year-old Anja definitely will be proud of current day. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast and sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with the listeners. And just, I'd love to hear from listeners whether or not they've been able to put one of these things into action from what we've been discussing today.
Little bits done routinely makes such a difference. It really does help. I think that would probably be the key, I think, to anything, is just consistently chipping away, and it slowly builds up. So I've loved chatting with you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Anja.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.